up the new scoreboard.
Some days I love you, Jason. Some days I love you a little less.
Swing and a miss on a changeup down.
It is a changeup, and it is ridiculous.
You've got to read the situation, read the hitter.
Turns, throws, got it, what a play! Oh, man!
This is Have a Seat with Jason Benetti and Dan Dickerson.
Here comes the manager. Hi, AJ.
Everybody be quiet.
How are you? Dad's here.
That's right. Clean your room.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks for being our guinea pig.
Yeah, no doubt. Be good. Be good. I'm going to tell everyone whether to come on the show or not based on your performance today.
He was looking right at you.
I don't know where anybody's looking.
Listen,
Just
I already have a file with HR. I don't need a bigger one.
Every day there's something, a possibility.
Yeah, there's always, well, especially when he tries to bait you into agreeing with him.
I don't do that.
We want to cover a lot of different subjects today,
Okay.
but kind of the evolution of you as a manager, because it was 15 years ago, almost exactly, May the 8th of 2009,
Oh, boy.
you take over as manager of the Arizona Diamondbacks at age 34, not the typical hire. You're replacing a manager in season from the front office where you've been. Director of player development.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just kind of want to go back to that, and then we can kind of talk about how things have changed through the years. But what was it like for you? I mean, is this exactly what you wanted to do? Was it a move of surprise when you were asked to do it? And what do you remember about the reception?
Oh, that's a loaded question. You know, first off, I'm way more comfortable today than I was in that day many years ago, because I never thought I would ever be a manager. I didn't. Once I stopped playing, we had a young family. My wife and I had young girls, and we were going to settle in, and we were in Phoenix. I took a job with the Diamondbacks. We had our house, our in-laws, like our life was starting to kind of blossom. And I was ready to move into something completely different. You know, I was a journeyman as a player, and so I wanted to settle in and just do something different. So Josh Burns was a GM at the time, and when he came to took me to lunch, and he's like, "Hey, I want you to be a manager." I thought he wanted me to go to Mobile, Alabama in Double A. Yeah, we had a bunch of hot prospects in Double A, and I'm like, "Josh, I don't want to manage, man. I'm leading the whole department. If you're upset with something that's going on in Mobile," he's like, "No, man, the big leagues." And I was shocked. So I went home. I threw up, literally.
Did you
Told
make
my
it
wife
to the
about it.
bathroom?
I did make it to the bathroom. But I was so nervous about it for two reasons. One, I felt totally unprepared for the question. And two, in my stomach, I knew I was gonna turn it down. And I did. I didn't take it. When they first offered the job to me, I didn't take it. And that led to further conversations later in the month. But, you know, Bob Melvin was the manager who continues to be an excellent manager in the big leagues. Kirk Gibson was the bench coach for the D-backs. There had been a playoff run in previous years. Like, it was just totally off my radar. So the second time I didn't turn it down. I knew they were making a move regardless. And that's really what I needed to know in order to take over was that they were going to do it. It had nothing to really do with me. They were going to do it with somebody else if they weren't going to do it with me. And so I took it. So what do I remember about the reception?
Yeah, because I remember thinking from
it was
afar.
awful.
I'm
No.
what
I'm
are
telling
they
you,
doing?
like, don't even walk in public awful, because
Oh my God.
I was 34 years old, and like, people saw me as a front office member, and I wasn't. I had worn uniform way more than I'd worn sort of the front office gear and the collared shirt, but perception-wise, it was really difficult. And I'll never forget walking out first day at Chase Field with the D-backs, and I'm walking out from they're stretching in left field, and we're about to start our first batting practice, and there's a lady standing over our dugout with a sign that says, "What does AJ stand for? A joke?" ? And so that's been etched in stone. My first thing I see out of the fans is so the columns came out, and people just didn't like the newness of the hire, and my route to get there was so unlike anybody else that ever got into that job. So it was toxic and uncomfortable. I'm already uncomfortable. I've never walked out to the mound and taken a pitcher out. I've never had a conversation with a player about playing time. and I have a lady over the dugout, asking me if my initials stand for a joke. So it is. It was not a warm welcome. Let's put it that way.
She didn't even go through the challenge of coming up with a word for A.
No, A was A. Like A's A. Like, yeah. What does A stand for? Just A. Like, No, she didn't. It was. But the message was clear though. She did not mince words.
So the amazing thing to me is you only get 200 games plus, a little over 200, before you're let go the next year.
Yeah.
In other words, they take a chance on you, but then I know Josh Burns was fired at the same time, but they never really gave you a full season. Did you, though, in that time acquire the bug and think, oh, I want to do this again?
So not for a while. When the next year was my first spring training, we were in Tucson, you go through, and there were some changes on the staff. Brian Price, the pitching coach, who's now the pitching coach of the Giants, had quit. Mel Stottlemyre Jr., I brought him from the minor leagues. There were some staff changes, and Matt Williams gave him his first job. He ended up going and managing in Washington. Bo Porter brought him to coach third. He ended up going and managing the Astros. Like, I was bringing sort of manager experience around me as much as I could, or at least manager quality people, trying to set up my staff. And then when things got bad in the next season, and Ken Kendrick, the owner, Derek Hall, the president, decided to make a change really across the board. I wanted to get as far away from the dugout as I possibly could. So that was just a low moment because, like, even though I didn't really ever feel like I got, up on my feet,
right,
you feel like a failure.
Yeah.
Like, you feel like you let a lot of people down. Like, my name is different. My kids are in school. My wife's hometown in Phoenix. It was just an ugly environment, and so we bolted and went. My wife rented a condo or townhouse in Lake Tahoe and get as far away from baseball as we could. When I came out of that, I was getting job offers to go back into the front office in various places, and I landed in San Diego.
What did you do in Tahoe when you were far away from everything?
Well, first off, I don't love water, so that's a tough place to go vacation if you don't like the water. And I like looking at the water. I'm not going to be in it. First off, it's cold. Secondly, it's deep. Third, I don't know what's going on underneath the surface. So we just enjoyed life away from our girls. We would go on hikes. Our girls were super small, and just invest as much time and energy into them. There was no MLB Network. There was the games weren't on my iPhone or iPad, so I could get away from the game. Have no idea what was going on until school started for my girls. I believe it was in September, we went back. So I had a couple months there to just decompress and hang out in nature.
Let's talk lineup construction.
Oh boy.
I'm holding what I believe to be your very first Arizona Diamondbacks lineup.
Okay.
And I wonder how your opinion of what a lineup should look like has changed since you started. I'm just going to read them off real fast. You don't have to break down like what that lineup would be differently, but I wonder. So it's Felipe Lopez at second base, Chris Young in center, Justin Upton in right, Mark Reynolds at third, Josh Weitzel at first, Connor Jackson in left, Miguel Montero catching, Josh Wilson at shortstop, Yusmeiro Petit, pitcher.
Oh boy.
As you hear that lineup,
Yeah.
and as you think about the way you constructed lineups back then, how's it different than now? Other than pitchers were hitting.
So general thought on obviously it's different. I actually had to take Yusmeiro Petit out of my first game after getting hit by a comebacker. That was old school double switch too. There was no DH in both leagues, so that was a chaotic game at the beginning and at the middle and at the end.
You remember the whole game.
I remember.
How quickly into the game did he get hit with
He
a
was like
comeback?
the second inning.
Oh,
Like, it
welcome
was-
to managing.
Yeah, welcome to managing. I've got chaos from the very beginning. So just in the world, this is the definition to drop you in the deep end of the pool. And I already told you I don't
What
like
you
water.
hate.
Right, exactly. So, the lineup construction is always an interesting topic for me because everyone wants to know what you believe. And what I believe is I have to maximize the opportunities for the personnel that you have. So I don't have a lineup construction like that has to be a particular way. I know I stack lefties here in order for me to pinch hit quite a bit, or I'll stack some righties so that I can pinch hit. That I want our best players to get the most at bats. In that lineup, as an example, Chris Young, who's now an analyst at MLB Network, he had power, had speed. He was a real complete player, a little bit of swing and miss. But you want those guys in the power position, which was the two hole at that point.
Yeah.
But I don't really have it has to be this. It depends on the group on the group that you have.
I just wondered if you always thought like that, or if
So
then
what I've
you-
always thought is like you try like that one as an example has 3 right-handed hitters in a row. I rarely will do that unless I'm going to pinch hit for somebody within that threesome.
Yeah.
If I can. Now, if you have a stacked right-handed lineup and you only have a couple left-handed hitters or switch hitters, there's not much you can do. But I want to get everybody away from thinking that I have this ideal that I have to have. Like, give me the personnel and then let me put the pieces together in a lineup that's going to put pressure on the starter. And probably more importantly, nowadays is going to put pressure on the bullpen and the decisions that come with that. So no 3 guys in a row. Switch hitters are gold because it puts a real dilemma in the other dugout. You don't want these pucks. Now, we didn't have 3-batter rule back then. You could bring in, a lefty for a lefty or a righty for one batter if you wanted to. That's changed a little bit over the years, but personnel drives lineup construction more than philosophy does.
And as you construct lineups, I've got pages of notes from all the things you've told us.
they're all right here. Actually.
Just in terms of all the different things you think about, but have you always thought that way in terms of you're thinking about the bullpen, you're thinking about forcing decisions, you're thinking about how can I get the most out of this guy? Which lefty am I going to pinch hit, not just a lefty? Have you always thought that way? Because I think fans should know you put a ton of time into thinking about it. You were talking this spring about you're thinking about it right up till bed, and you're probably dreaming about it. Is that something that kind of evolved through the years, or have you always kind of thought that way? Because it is different, I think, than a lot of managers think.
Yeah, so I've always thought that it's lazy to think left on left, right on right, because not everyone is created equally. I remember I had a left-handed hitter in Houston, Josh Reddick, who could handle a certain style lefty, but could never, handle the high-end velo was really hard for him. So guys, power lefties were different. The little finesse guys that will come in and spin breaking balls, no problem, he can handle them. But he came from Oakland, who was strict right-left platoon anytime they brought in a lefty. And so I remember the first time I left him in the game, and he was like, he sat up straight, he was excited. He asked me why, and I walked him through like, listen, there are some lefties I'm going to hit against. These are the other ones that are actually better against righties because of the slow spin. We need you to hang in there. You might need to bunt. You might need to hit ball behind the runner. You might need to do whatever you can to contribute. But it's not an advantage for me to hit a different player. That sort of shook the players because they've always been raised as right on right, left on left. I'm not the only one that does it that way, but communication's key in that, and it's not a one size fits all. There are specific guys like on this team, when Andy Ibanez and Matt Vierling are on the bench, they're not both training for the same at bat. They're looking at this. I want you against this lefty. I want you against that lefty if they have multiple guys.
Right.
That in itself has been, I think a growth for the last couple of years because of the personnel.
Is that the technology that helps you with that in terms of talking about spin and shapes, or have you always been able to just look at video and see it?
Performance. We can measure everything now, but the performance will tell me more than anything. Does the guy hit velo 95 and above, left-handed?
Yeah,
Does he
go right to the basics?
You can go right to the basics of what these guys handle. There's history. There's also, things that guys are working on, like Michael Bedard, Keith Beauregard, Lance. These guys will come up and say, hey, listen, Vierling's changing his swing path a little bit on these. He's better against cutters than the numbers are going to show you. So it's a combination of what I see and what I know, and then what I can gather for context from the hitting coaches. So it's not just throwing it out there for the sake of throwing it out there, but it's also not an exact science.
I wonder if we had video of every day of your life, like the Truman Show. You ever see the Truman Show?
Yeah.
I wonder when the first moment we would, as viewers, say, his mind works like this.
I think the first moment would be so when I get up, I'm very routine oriented, and I'll get a coffee and I will sit down. The first thing that I do will be review the lineups for the series.
I mean, even like 6 years old, 7
you mean when
years
I'm young?
old, 8 years old. If we're watching AJ Hinch longitudinally,
oh yeah,
when is that first moment where we're like, oh man, he does have that inside?
Yeah,
of him?
I think when I got to college, I started asking a ton of questions about the game. Like I'd watched it like in high school. I went through the draft. I didn't sign. Went to college. I go to Stanford. I got a bunch of guys around me that come from different parts of and a ton of coaches that had a ton of experience. And I started asking questions as a catcher about the opponent. So I learned the majority about the game from the catching position, because the essence of the game is the pitcher-batter confrontation. That, as a catcher, I'm involved in that all the time. As a hitter, I'm involved in that 4 times, 5 times, or 2 or 3 times if the manager hit for me.
When the
manager hit. Yeah, only if you're losing. If you win, here's the thing I tell our guys, you don't want to get pinch hit for as a catcher? Win the game. I rarely take guys out whenever we call shutouts. So anyway, but going back to those questions about game calling, because when I got to college, my college coach, Mark Marquis, and Dean Stotts, who've been there for years, handed me the keys to call the game, which was unheard of at that juncture of time. It still is to this day. And I had to learn a lot about the game if I had the responsibility to call every pitch. So I would say, my freshman year, and I'm thrust into the Pac-10, we can get into that later, but
rest its soul.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to know everything about the matchups, and I think that's what kickstarted it.
You talk about learning to call a game. There's so many elements to it, but is reading, to me, the fascinating part about Brad Ausmus used to say, and he was one of the better ones at calling a game and handling a staff. It took him 4 or 5 years to really get that feel, to make it automatic, calling the pitch based on his experience. Did it come naturally to you? And also that ability to read a hitter.
Yeah.
Seems amazing to me that you can do that as you're trying to handle 95.
You know when it's easier to read a hitter is when you have leverage, because they're uncomfortable. So I've learned that getting ahead is paramount. 2 out of the first 3 pitches being strike is paramount. And you have a lot of options. Like one of my phrases I use with the guys is like, you got options. And if you've got options and you have a different way to read that hitter and see how you can get him out, that only comes by getting ahead of him. So the hitter you can read, you can be as prepared, at this level you can be as prepared as you can be. There's still that small semblance of doubt. I remember I was catching behind Bobby Abreu, who was a terrific player for a long time with the Phillies. And it would say the numbers, like even back admitted analytics. We were going, hey, listen, he takes the ball 85% of the time. So my question is, when the bases are loaded, are we going first pitch fastball right down the middle? And the answer is no. You got to read the situation, read the hitter, know your pitcher's strength. That might be one of the 15%. So you can't just go by the numbers.
Right.
You have to have feel. And the way you create feel is by gathering as much information about everything, about it could be the shadows. It could be the way he has approached the game, as an example. Might be his previous at bat. I know nobody likes to say this, in the analytical world, but when a dude punches out, the next time up, he's more of a threat than ever to swing at the first pitch. Things like that are not going to be baked into the numbers. They're going to be something you have to learn, as you play.
You mentioned hitters being uncomfortable. 1, 2, whatever. If I'm watching at home, what are the signals I can look for? What do batters do physically when they're down on themselves or uncomfortable? What are you looking for behind the plate?
So I think I'm looking for guys that are caught in between. So one of the things that we look at as a hitter is where your hands are with where your feet are. When your front foot is down, are you in the launch position where I can swing? The earlier that is, the scarier it is. Like that means the dude is locked in. And if he's in between, something's going to be amiss, right? And what I look for when I know guys are uncomfortable, they check swing. That means they are late on fastballs, they are early on breaking balls, and they're caught in between. We call it the teeter-totter. You're going to go back and forth with their timing. Obviously, most guys stay in the same part of the box. But if they start moving around, trying to guess with you, or hey, this guy's throwing really hard, and they step back and go a little bit further away from the pitcher. This guy's got a good breaking ball, and he moves up. Those are all signs of somebody being a little uncomfortable, kind of outside their norm. Part of the value of video is we can watch on reel over and over and over again what someone's normal is. Once we know they're normal, we know what their adjustments are, and that's why we stare at this video. It's why every time I get talking about getting a coffee in the morning, it's iPad and watching previous video, before
to set a
series.
baseline.
To set a baseline for my reaction in the game on what I see when they're uncomfortable. But long-winded answer to tell you, if I had one thing that I could pick, I would pick the timing of which the guy's ready to hit and where his front foot is. When he's in between, you got him.
So I do wonder, just hearing all of that, and much has been written about your psych degree, which psychology course really spoke to you most when you were taking them?
You know, we had my first sports psychology class was taught by our athletic director at Stanford, Ted Leland. And, you know, he started getting in, because there's the psychology of human, you know, the mood swings, the way people think, how they process. Are they growth-minded? Are they, you know, sort of stuck in their ways? There's a lot to talk about just the human brain in general. When you apply that into sports and the competitiveness, that's a whole different animal. And I think that the way that Ted taught, I should call him Dr. Leland, sorry. The way Dr. Leland taught that class opened the eyes to what competition does to the person. You know, we talk all the time about our players. Like, we have 26 players with us right now, 27 with Andy Ibanez hurt. 28 because Matt Manning comes back every 5 days. But
Hi, man.
they're different people than they are competitors. So the competition is a key component to the sports psychology on what failure does to people, what the competition does to people, what the elements, right? The third deck, the crowd reaction, the big stage of being in the big leagues, the name on the back of the jersey with the opponent on the mound. Like, all of that matters to how a player is going to respond. It's not just the development of the person.
So when you've got 26 players that you're trying to handle every day, how do you use some of those things you learned? Because it seems like you try to communicate at least a hello to every single player every single day. But what does that look like day to day in terms of how you use it and how you communicate with players?
Yeah, I learned what guys, how they respond to both success and failure. You know, it's funny, on most of us in these positions will always talk about the difficulty of the game, like the failure rate, right? Like 3 out of 10, the dude's going to go to the Hall of Fame, or
right.
Kind of those theories of like, you can fail 7 out of 10 times at this level, or you know, you're talking about strikeout rate for pitchers. You're going to give up contact way more than you're going to get swing and miss. So we all deal with failure a ton. I actually care about how they deal with success too, because one of the biggest threats to success is comfort. When guys think they got it all figured out, and so I spend a lot of my time sort of bringing people back to neutral, like getting everybody to understand like what the challenge is today is different than the challenge yesterday. Like, we'll build confidence, of course. We will try to ride momentum, of course. We will adhere to kind of the player feeling that he's on top of the world, of course. But a lot of times we have to separate what happened, even within a game. A guy can have 2 hits at the beginning of the game, doesn't make him in a good position to have success against a certain pitcher in the 7th or 8th inning. That may be controversial to some people, but that's the reality of human behavior. So we spend a lot of time making sure they understand what the challenge is today. That way we're not sort of overly depressed on failure before or overly cocky that I got this all figured out.
So if you're trying to stay at neutral as a manager, I do wonder, what are the little things in baseball that grate on your ability to be neutral emotionally? Like the smallest things.
Oof. Now you're baiting me into a different question. But I will tell you the things that get under my skin the most. Number one is sloppy play.
Yeah.
I like clean baseball. I think you got to be prepared in order to play clean. The umpire-player confrontation is something that irritates me, because one of them is right, and from the side, I don't know which one it is. You know, and I especially today with the way the strike zone is shown, the way it's evaluated, all the different websites that now post what the umpires are doing. You know, that will irritate me the more that we focus on something external. You know, you have to defend your players and you have to fight with your players. But there's nothing worse than fighting for the player, getting thrown out, going upstairs and seeing that ball in the box, and you were wrong. Like that is like awful. But I think that you know, I can handle failure. I can handle misplays. It's all part of it. I can't handle unpreparedness. And that might be sort of on a macro view where you are going into a series, or it might be on a micro view in a game on a pitch where we're not in a ready position, as an example, and the ball is hit and I miss it by 3 inches. Like, I always wonder, what if?
What did you think I was baiting you into?
Arguing, but well, the umpire thing kicked in my head, and I thought you you were going to try to get me to talk about umpires.
I learned at law school to ask open-ended questions that you don't have pre-prepared answers for.
Fair.
So
I didn't go to law school, so I didn't know.
I'm not saying that I did that in that case.
Right.
But
Right. Exactly.
I remember interviewing you when you were the Astros, 2018, maybe 2019. And you mentioned that. I mean, you're nice enough to give me a solid 10 minutes in your office.
were they a solid 10 minutes? Do you remember it?
Probably
as a
15.
solid?
Knowing Dan, probably 15. He'll take an extra 5, which is fine. I mean, I love talking to Dan every day.
He remembers it as 10, though.
He remembers it as 10. I remember it as 20, 15, 20.
10's a lot. I mean, when you're asking an opposing manager for some time. And you said, you mentioned for the first time that I had heard it, always make sure that your head are where your feet are.
Yeah.
And that is your mantra. But it's impressive to me that you get these guys to live that. In other words, it could easily wash over them, but clearly there's a lot more to it. That's the overriding philosophy. But there's a lot more to it that goes into it to make sure they live that every single day. What are some of the things that you've learned through the years to how to make sure they do that?
Yeah, so this is a great topic because there's this sort of age-old thing in sports where what is a team meeting, right? So I'm gonna get back to your question in a minute.
Yeah.
But a team meeting, when things are going poorly, I always get asked, "Are you going to call the group together?" Well, you're going to give that lecture and that speech. You don't have to do that if you are consistent in your messaging. So from the first day of spring training, all the way through the season, all the way through the postseason, they know what to expect from me, and there's a touch point every day. The reason I don't like those team meetings, it means you failed in between the messaging points to deal with things. So back to your question of you learn to preach it over and over and over and over again, where they're always reminded, whether it's through my quotes, whether it's through my sitting with the boys, having breakfast with them, whether it's post-game, whether it's somebody in my office having a coffee with me and we're just kind of catching up on life. There are always points where you can reflect back to the message that you started with and the message that you continue. I can't all of a sudden let things get away from ourselves and then go, oh, remember I told you we're supposed to keep our head where our feet are. I've missed a ton of windows of opportunity to get them in a good place mentally to compete. So I shouldn't have to wait for meetings. Do I call meetings? Of course. There are some times where it needs to happen and I need to stand in front of them and let them know how I feel. But I think that's just as much an indictment on me as it is the situation you're in or the players, because I should be doing that every day. That way they know that the message is crystal clear. It's been the same. And if you talk to our players, they will give you the little bullet points because they hear it all the time. In every meeting that I have in spring, in these casual meetings, every hitters meeting we have before a series, whether I have a meal with them, whether I'm sitting through a rain delay, they know coming in what they're going to get from me, and it's hammered into their head that we better focus on today's game because that's the only thing we need to care about.
So same message, just delivered in different ways over the course of
a bunch of
the
different
season.
ways. Yeah, and I can't use the same terminology.
Right.
They don't want to hear me in front of the room say the same thing. It's like a teacher.
Yeah.
You don't want an eye roll. You don't want someone just has been there.
Well, here
done
goes
that.
Dad again with
Right? Yeah, exactly.
head where your feet are.
But you better pay attention because the problem isn't what's happened. That's already in the past. The problem is the competition that's in front of you.
You said one of the biggest things you learned from that first job. The players want you to be genuine.
Yeah.
Show them who you are so that you can actually get that message through and they're going to follow your lead.
Yeah, they don't want an actor or an imposter. They want someone who is crazy consistent. They want someone who has their back. They want a good teammate. They want some mentorship and some leadership.
Yeah.
They want you to bring good coaches in. When you're mad, be mad. When you're happy, be happy. When, they want authentic relationship with you. They know I have the desk in the office. I don't need to continually tell them I'm the manager. I get the decision power. I get it. But they want to know kind of what makes me tick too. And now this group will mess with me a ton. They will. I've got these mannerisms, or I'll say these words. And
What
they
mannerisms do you have that
You know
are
what?
repeatable?
That's not for me to discuss on this type of podcast.
They seem to think that you're not that peggable in terms of what you say. You don't repeat
No,
phrases over.
I say the same thing in different ways.
Right, but so what are the mannerisms? What do you do?
I mean, they'll know. I've had pitchers tell me, when I look over there and you're staring down, you're 5 seconds away from taking me out of the game. They know. The big thing with the pitchers is when they're walking off the mound, they will look at me, and they know if I pace behind where I sit, I'm taking them out of the game, and I stick my hand out like a handshake.
Yeah.
They know that if I'm right on the steps right away, I'm probably going to give them knuckles, which means they're staying in the game. They have different motivations. Starters never want to see the handshake. Relievers never want to see the fist bump. So like they're not equally motivated with what they want to do. So they will mess with me. Like I've had a starter stick his knuckles out like he's going to give me knuckles from the foul line. You guys probably haven't seen it, but like they're like, no, I'm not shaking your hand. Like I'm not coming out of this game.
Or they'll go to the end of the dugout.
Oh yeah, they'll try to do it. Yeah, they don't realize it all leads to the same dugout. Like I can find them wherever.
What are those conversations like on the mound sometimes? Because everybody reacts differently when you come out, right?
So I've started. I never used to do this. So when I was, I picked the brains of a bunch of managers. When I became a manager, this was still in the, Tony La Russa, Cito Gaston, Bobby Cox, just Buck Showalter, Boch. I mean, we're going to manage against was doing. I mean, just huge names in the manager world. And I'd ask them a ton of questions, and they all had varying degrees of answers on sort of, do you wait and have a conversation with your pitcher and then motion out? And I'll never forget, like the managers that you'll see, the ones that point before they get to the line want no part of the confrontation. Like the decision is already made. I'm sorry you do that. Like they can fight you all they want. You've already told the umpire and signaled them in. But those, I rarely go out there without a decision being made. I've done it a few times. Like my players will tell me, like they'll go back and watch video of my previous stop, and they'll say like, well, I saw you go talk to Verlander or you go talk to Cole, and I'm like, sorry, man, you're not one of them. Like
They look that up?
Oh, I look it up all the time. They've looked at all my
gosh.
ejections. They've looked at all my interactions. They were, oh, you're nervous right there. Like you showed me in Game 7 of the World Series. You're like, shut up. Like stop, get off your phone, interact with somebody, stop being a kid.
Leadership is all well and good until all 26 people can talk to each other about you at all times.
Oh my gosh, I know. And they can do it in a way that you don't know about it. So it's, I will tell you the challenge is, and it's a great challenge, is being consistent with your messaging. Like I always tell players, like I'll never lie to you or misdirect you because I don't want to have to remember what I told you. Like I would just rather tell you the truth, and sometimes that's harsh, sometimes it's unknown, but I'm just going to be brutally honest with you because I don't have the capacity to think about every single conversation. So I'm going to tell you what I believe. And some of that, is not a challenge because you don't want to like crush players when they're down, or you don't want to tell them, why am I not closing, or why am I not pitching more often? I'm not going to tell them it's because you stink. I'm going to give them some critical feedback, but I can't just tell them, oh no, I'm going to get you in there if I'm really not. Like inconsistent behavior is the fastest way to get your players to not believe in you.
Yeah. What if we were to line up like a list of biographies of people that you would find fascinating? What would the common theme be of people who interest you? Great people who interest you.
Yeah. So I am fascinated by sort of excellence and extreme dominance. So like in the sports world, it's sort of easy, like, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, LeBron, Tiger, Tom Brady. Like, I'm just curious, like, what the common theme is amongst all of them and how their minds work. So it's easy to go to Hall of Famers in sports that have achieved a certain level that if it maybe even exceeded like greatness, like whatever next is after greatness. I think leaders is always interesting to me. So like the presidents are always interesting to me, whether I agree with them or not. Leaders in companies and CEOs I just think leadership to me is what fascinates me. And then on top of that is like who can get like 110% out of their 100% ability.
Yeah.
When not just on the ascent, but actually, when everybody expects you to score 40, you score 40. When everybody expects you to win the Super Bowl, you win like 7 or however many it was. When everybody expects you to win a tournament and you win by 10, like the way Tiger was doing it. Those to me are incredible reads and studies on preparation, on focus, and ultimately on performance.
Why is that so fascinating to people? I wonder.
I think people are fascinated by achievement. Like we all, when you wake up in the day, I don't care where you work, what you do, you want to feel at the end of the day like you accomplished something. Like all of us. Might be a good day's work where I'm getting food on the table for my family and paying rent. It might be ascending through a business and going from an intern to an employee to a director to a vice president to a president. It might be in sports, for us in the minor, it's going through the minor leagues and getting to the top level in the big leagues, and then making an all-star team, and then making, getting all the accolades. But our society, people are fascinated by achievement, and it might be something small, might be something big, but it all is accomplishing something.
So knowing that that's the most important thing to somebody, how do you tell somebody at the end of spring training that they're going to AAA?
Well, the part of that is giving them something to work on to change the route. So instead of going down, we're going to stay up here. So we always have feedback. You should always give critical feedback. But you're breaking somebody's heart for the moment.
Yeah.
It's harder to release someone where you feel like you are cutting off their opportunity. Sending somebody to AAA is giving them another path to work on things and be better. Releasing them, especially when my first job was a farm director, and I'm releasing kids out of A-ball, like I feel like I'm ending their dream. That was really hard. But regardless of the bad news, you got to be honest with them. But if you're thorough and honest and give them a path to get better and come back, then they will respect it. If you are dismissive and you have no empathy, then they will not only resent the decision that you made or that collectively you made with the organization, they will resent you. And so I think that's really important to keep in mind when you're delivering bad news.
Some handle it better than others.
Oh, man. So, I had a player, when I was a farm director, I had a player who tried to lift my desk and flip it. It was a AAA outfielder.
How close did he get?
Well, it was bolted down to the ground. He ended up blowing out his back. So it ended up really bad for him. But I told him, this was a volatile situation where this kid had signed. And somebody got sent down from the minor league, so we had to release somebody out of AAA. And he'd had a good camp. And so I knew he was going to be a bad meeting, so I brought in reinforcements. And Rick Shue, who was my hitting coordinator at the time, was in there with me. And when I delivered the news to him, I said, listen, we're going to choose to give the opportunity to somebody else. And here's why. And I went through all the different scenarios and let him know why he didn't fit in AA with the prospects and he wasn't going to fit as he was getting squeezed out. And so when he got up, he tried to lift my desk. Well, it was bolted to the ground, and he strained his back and fell to the ground in a ton of agony. So bad news and bad result for him. But
how did
that's
you not
the only
laugh?
physical one. That was the only physical, sort of altercation. I guess we should say. So never, nothing like that here with the Tigers or in the big leagues. But that one sticks out.
You like making connections. It's one of the things that I love about how you talk with players, and whether it's in spring training, you have your little daily meeting, you might connect with a great from another sport or something that happened in another sport. You bring people in sometimes. But for instance, last year, you connected Mason Engler to David Clyde, whose strikeout record or scoreless innings record he had broken as a high schooler in Texas. This spring, you made sure that you took Jackson Jobe down to Tampa for a game just so he could meet with the guy that you knew that would meet with him, Garrett Cole. I think those are really neat, and that's what this sport seems so much about, the connections you've made through the years. But you make sure that guys know these things, and it's kind of an everyday thing with you.
It is. Part of it is educational. Like, these guys need to know, when Alan Trammell walks in the room, what he's done for this organization, for the sport. When Willie Horton comes by, not just that he's famous and he was a big deal, but like actually look into the riots in this city and what he stood for at the most vulnerable time in this city's history. Also, like other interests, like it could be. I thought it was good. David Clyde showed up to our game, and he has a chance to meet Mason Englert, and we told the story in our morning meeting. One of the things I try to do with teams is get them to be relatable within the confines of the clubhouse. So it might be a late round draft pick who's a prospect who's coming up, and or not even, it could be mid round. So hey, this guy was a 10th round pick. He's an aspiring young pitcher. Hey, by the way, Tarek Skubal was drafted in the 9th round and was not a prospect until he forced his way onto the scene, and now he's starting opening day for us. So that just makes that player who was drafted in the 10th or 11th round feel like he's got a chance. If there's a story to be told or I can connect the dots for somebody, all the better. And so I just think it's important for overall understanding of the opportunities that we have. It's fun because the monotony of spring training 45 days in a row, like what are you going to talk about for 45 days? Like it's not bunt defense and first and thirds. It's
Not
you got to
every day.
bring something else to the table. But the most important thing is make them relatable. I mean, I try to pinpoint the guys that are going to be making their major league debut and 2 years ago it was Reese Olson. We tried to get him extra Instagram followers because he had a bizarrely low Instagram room. It was a whole team effort. But then he debuts later in that year, and he's broken the ice. Like players know who he is. It connects the dots. He did get some extra Instagram followers thanks to some of our famous pitchers, and Javi I think even gave him a shout out. But little things like that are just building this culture of togetherness, and it can be fun. So
We talked about lineup construction, and you've discussed pinch hitting for somebody as more of an opportunity for the next guy instead of, hey, I'm hurting you, I'm taking you out. In life, if you could bring in pinch hitters for you for tasks, to give them the opportunity to do something that you might not be as good at as they are, give them the opportunity to do this portion of life for you, what would you pinch hit for yourself?
God. Some days I love you, Jason. Some days I love you a little less. That's a good question.
Breathtaking, really.
just like the eclipse. It's breathtaking. I think for the most part, I think I can do everything around the house. I think I can fix lights. I think I can fix fireplaces. I think I can install ceiling fans with no electricity, which is next to impossible. I had to run some electricity to a wall. I think I should be able to paint and redo floors and do everything. My wife would tell you that I would rather try and fail and then hire somebody on the second go round to fix my problems. So I would pinch hit for me in any activity that I'm not equipped to do, which is most of my. Now I can do most small tasks around, but I'm not the handyman that I think I am. But I try hard. But as I tell my players, this isn't a try hard league. So it's I'd pinch hit for me in most day-to-day home activities.
That was so earnest when you said I try hard.
I do try hard. I try hard. It's either because I don't want to pay somebody to do it, or I truthfully feel like I should be able to do these type of things. But
You love me a little less for that question?
well, not
hard.
really. But I like
That's
poking
hard.
fun at you.
2024 Tigers. This is really a different roster than you have had in your 4 years here. What kind of excites you about what this season, the possibilities of this season, given the roster you have?
Well, I number one, I think we have tremendous pitching, and we have pretty good depth. I mean, it's going to be tested. Like we know that. But even early in the season, we've had the likes, back-to-back rainouts or whatever, and Matt Manning came up and pitched great in both as the pseudo sixth starter, which not every team has that luxury to have somebody who should arguably be here and bring him up. Our bullpen, I talk about path to wins all the time. Like we can go so many different directions. We've already had a bunch of guys pitch in those bridge innings, and then a couple different guys finish games. So I think we're going to be in a lot of games, and that gives me a lot of trust that we can find a way to win. And early in the season, we've done that with a few bizarre wins. But I think that will be healthy as we continue on. We're going to warm up offensively, but the pitching is going to allow the variance and performance of the young hitters to kind of go with the ebbs and flow of the season. There's going to be a stretch where we need to hit in order to protect our pitching, just because they're going to go through lulls like everybody else. But if you can be in the majority of games, let's call it upwards of 140, 150 games where you are legitimately in it, you'll have your dust, your 5 or 10 that are you just get beat. You're going to win a lot more games than you're expected to, and I'm excited about this group that feels deeper than the ones I've had before.
We'll let you go in a minute here. but I'm new to Detroit. What have you learned about Tigers fans over the course of your time here that is just different than other stops that you've been to?
Well, they're passionate. Maybe our fan base is passionate. It's a little different in Detroit, the depths of the passion, because you have deeply rooted Tigers fans generationally. Like, this has been, Michigan's team forever. There is pure love for here that you don't find in every city. Now, there's great fan bases everywhere, and I'm not trying to be controversial, but I am very happy to be a part of this organization, knowing the flood of Tiger fans that we have that have stuck through some really low times and that deserve a better team. I can go anywhere and we'll run into somebody that'll talk to me about the Tigers. All-Star break, I can go over to Traverse City and Bay Harbor and enjoy the beautiful northern part of Michigan, and I'll run into a Tiger fan, Tiger gear, Tiger shirt, Tiger hat. And they all have something in common, which is a deep-rooted love for Tiger baseball. I'm proud that's going to continue. I know that opening day here, we talk about it all the time, straight holiday. Like, I've never seen tailgating at a baseball game like I saw this year on my walk to the ballpark. And that, I know what this place can be like. Everybody will talk to you about how much they love playing here, especially those that have played through the winning years. And we can turn this place, into and for the next generation, into the one of the best places in the league.
Who should we interview from your clubhouse next?
Oof. I would go with Scooble. He's got a lot to say on a lot of topics, and he's pretty open about it. If you can make him uncomfortable, that would make me happy. If you can,
we got the right guy.
if you can convince him every time he comes out, it's not an indictment on him or me, for that matter. That would be helpful.
I don't think 45 minutes in this very posh setting is going to do that, but we'll try.
Yeah, you should. It's a tall task, but I think our personalities in this clubhouse. I think Riley Green is growing into his own. I think Jason Foley, who is a great story to tell, being undrafted. And turning into the pseudo closer. I know you thought I'd never use that word.
How do you apply for pseudo closer?
Yeah, well, that's better than non-closer. I don't know. It's you can start by throwing 98 to 100 with sink. That's a pretty good start.
Awesome.
We get some good personalities to bring to the fans, and the kids are growing up.
AJ Hinch, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, AJ.
Yeah, you got it.